Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well after the long weekend. My name's Tommy Johnson, and I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to today's Eaton Peabody's Growth Basics for Business. This is our monthly breakfast seminar series, which provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. I want to thank Eaton Peabody for allowing us to bring you this virtual event series for the entire season. I'd like to welcome you all to this first installment of Growth Basics for the calendar year 2023. However, this 10-part season-long series does run from September through June 2023. Today's topic, Maine's new retirement plan mandate, is presented by Nate Moody from Lebel Harriman, Beth Bordowitz from the Maine Retirement Savings Board, and Chris Cluff of PaperTrails. I know they have a wealth of knowledge amongst these three that I'm very excited to hear from. Now, like all of the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com, check out our events page, and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Before we get to today's presentation, I'm excited to share with you that we're using an online broadcasting platform called StreamYard for all virtual Chamber events. This platform provides many improved production and interaction elements that I think you'll be happy to see. I'd also like to remind you that if you have questions for our presenters, please type them in the YouTube chat and they'll be relayed to our presenters throughout the presentation. We may also save some time at the end for a final Q&A at the conclusion of the event. Now, at this point, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor of Growth Basics for Business, Eaton Peabody. For the past 5 years, Eaton Peabody has been the presenting sponsor of this series, and they continue their support this year. Now I'd like to invite Marketing Director Nate Levesque to say a few words. Take it away, Nate.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. I want to thank the Portland Chamber for doing such a great job of putting these together and providing new and engaging content month after month. I also want to thank our presenters, Beth and Chris, for joining us for the first time today, and a special thank you to Nate Moody for returning to the series once again. Lastly, whether this is your first Growth Basics series or your 10th, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those of you that may not be familiar with our firm, we are a full-service, Maine-based law firm with nearly 50 attorneys serving Maine clients from offices in Augusta, Bangor, Brunswick, and Portland. We assist companies of all sizes in a variety of industries, so whether you're an established financial institution or a small business taking the first steps, we can help with all of your legal needs. To learn more about the services that we provide and the industries that we serve, please visit our website, eatonpeabody.com. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn to stay up to date with legal presentations as well as other legal updates. Thank you. And back to you, Tommy.
Thank you, Nate. Really appreciate the support we've received from you and from Eaton Peabody over the last 5 years. Now, let's introduce our presenters. With us today are Nate Moody, CFPA, Retirement Plan Advisor from Lebel Harriman Retirement Advisors, Beth Bordowitz, JD, Executive Director of the Maine Retirement Savings Board, and Chris Cluff, President of PaperTrail. Nate's primary focus is advising companies on retirement and executive benefit programs, including 401k, 403b, ESOPs, KSOPs, and non-qualified deferred compensation plans. Nate is passionate about the financial wellness and finding innovative employer solutions to address the ever-changing obstacles facing individuals preparing for retirement. Beth is the Startup Executive Director of Maine's to-be-established Auto IRA program, an organizational leader with significant success partnering with stakeholders to take public policy initiatives from concept through implementation and management. She's focused on the areas of economic development, higher education, and financial capability. And lastly, Chris is an owner of a small, vibrant company, and his goals are to refine process, improve client experience, and build new relationships. PaperTrails provides expert payroll, bookkeeping services to small businesses. With that, let's get to our presentation. Take it away, folks.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I can't think of any better way to start off the new year and early morning than to cover retirement legislation. I'm very excited to cover it. I think this is going to be a really transformative and important program for the state of Maine and as important, Mainers. So we'll jump right in. Tommy did a great job introducing each of us. Beth or Chris, do you want to expand on anything he covered? I don't know if I could do any better on my introduction.
Yep, I'm fine.
I think we're good.
Beautiful. Let's get right into it. So here's what we're going to cover today. I know everybody or most everybody is on here to really get an inside look at the new Maine Retirement Savings Program. But I wanted just to quickly start with a little bit of context and background on sort of how did we arrive here? What was the impetus and the reason for Maine adopting this law, and candidly why a lot of other states are quickly moving to add this legislation as well. We'll obviously dive into the Maine Retirement Savings Program. Who is it going to affect? What does it mean? When is it going to be effective? But we also want to talk a little bit about what some alternative retirement plan options are. I think what's a really important piece of this is that the Maine Retirement Savings Program isn't designed to replace the traditional employer-sponsored retirement program. And in fact, it's really, designed to complement it. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. And then we'll finally end with a little additional legislative update, federally speaking, which is the Secure Act 2.0 and the impact that will have on small employers that do want to start their own plan as a result of this legislation. So jumping right into it, I think many folks are aware that Maine is, or actually has been for a while now, the oldest population in the country. But unfortunately, what I think a lot of people don't realize is we also have one of the poorest senior population in the country as well. And what you can see here is, in fact, 1 out of every 5 Maine seniors live almost exclusively on Social Security. And that average Maine Social Security benefit is just $1,400 a month, or about $17,000 a year. So think about that for a second. 1 out of 5 Maine seniors are living on $1,400 a month. For reference, the federal poverty line for this year is about $15,000. So 1 out of 5 Maine seniors are living basically at the federal poverty line. And this really just highlights, what a large retirement savings crisis we have in America, but especially right here in our own community. And unfortunately, a lot of these folks got caught in that phase between when pension plans were phased out and before 401k plans were really widely adopted, and there's a lot of information out there on them. And the reason why that's so important is because access to a retirement plan through your work is everything. When we look at all of the research, it shows people are significantly more confident and more prepared for retirement if they have access to a retirement plan through work. A study by AARP found that you're 15 times more likely to save for retirement if you have access to a retirement plan through work than if you do not. And when we look at those that have access to a retirement plan right here in the state of Maine, we find that almost 1 out of 2 private sector employees in Maine do not have access to a retirement program. Over 200,000 Mainers that do not have access to a retirement plan through work. And we just saw how much less prepared those folks are for retirement than their counterparts that do have access to a plan. So you'll hear this, this word access quite a bit as we go through this presentation. That's really what this legislation, this law is all about, is to improve access to retirement programs. It's not to replace, it's to improve access and really just to broaden people's understanding of what it takes to save for retirement. What we find is it's not just tiny or self-employed workers who don't have access to a retirement plan. In fact, almost 90% of that retirement access gap here in Maine is addressed or could be addressed by employers that have 5 or more employees. And that 5 or more employees is an important threshold. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means as it relates to the Maine Retirement Savings Program. But there's a lot of folks that aren't covered at larger employers that you would think might have access to a plan. And another thing I just wanted to note here is this is not specific to Maine. We're seeing 2 to 3 states a year adopt these laws, implementing these programs, because frankly, they work. They help those people that don't have access elsewhere and might not, be thinking about retirement. And as anybody who saves for retirement can understand, time is everything. Time is your most powerful force when it comes to saving for retirement because of that compound interest effect. So if you can get somebody to start saving in their 20s or 30s rather than their 40s or 50s, that's going to make an exponential difference in what they have saved up for retirement. And so you can see here which states have implemented some form of this auto IRA legislation. And I mentioned right at the beginning, these programs are not designed to replace employer-sponsored plans. When you look at this slide, you'll see that actually it's quite the opposite. Almost every state that has adopted this legislation has seen an increase in the number of companies that sponsor a plan, not a decrease. So it's actually motivating a lot of these smaller businesses to finally start this plan on their employees' behalf. And there's a lot of advantages to starting your own plan relative to using the auto IRA plan. And we're going to cover some of those as well. So with that long-winded context, I want to introduce sort of the star of the show, which is Beth, who is the executive director and really tasked with helping to implement and oversee this new program. Beth?
All right. Well, thank you, Nate. And I really appreciate that background because it was important. That is what drove the legislature to adopt this legislation in 2021 to help fill that access gap, to follow some of the best practices in the retirement circles, that putting people into a plan, making it an opt-out rather than an opt-in, makes all of the difference in terms of participation. And you saw the importance of filling that gap because it's tough to live on very little money, and it's tough, as Nate said, to start saving when you're older. Starting early is really helpful, and this program can be a real good starting place. So, Nate, why don't you flip to the next slide? Thank you. So, as I mentioned, this legislation passed in June of 2021. It does require that Maine employers who are covered employers, which we'll get to a little in just a minute, automatically enroll their covered employees into this new program. The law established the board, which the governor appointed the members of, and they held the first meeting in April of 2022. So everything in the government is a bit of a process. So first the law passed, and then the board members had to go through a confirmation here, and they had to be appointed. So that was all done. The first meeting was held in April of 2022. And the first thing, next slide. The first thing that the board had to do actually was hire someone. So they hired me. So I've been on the job just 3 months. And as all of you business owners know, there's a lot to starting a business because unlike some efforts, this isn't just starting the program. Literally had to get the employer identification number, open the bank account, all of those things that go with starting a new business, go with starting a new state agency as well. So we're going to get to some of the timelines on this that will be difficult. But first, the background. A covered employer is going to be any employer in this state who has not offered a qualified retirement plan in the current calendar year or the past 2 years. So if you are currently offering a retirement plan or you have within the last 2 years, you will not be a covered employer. You will not have to enroll your employees in this particular program. You just keep doing what you were doing. There are a couple of employers that are excluded, governmental entities, and also, and this is important too, especially for all of you new businesses, if you haven't been in business for the current calendar year or preceding calendar year, you're also not a covered employer. So it's really employers who, and also you have to have 5 or more employees, which we'll also get to in just a minute, but employers who've been around 2 years and have 5 or more employees and who do not offer a qualified plan, that you'll be involved in this program. Why don't you move on, Nate? So covered employee is anyone who's over 18 years of age. So this is basically all of your employees, as long as they're over 18, will be covered. There are a few individuals that probably are not relevant to this crowd who are not going to be covered. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. A covered employee may include under the legislation part-time, seasonal, or temporary employees. I will say that most states who run these programs do include those employees. The board will be engaging in rulemaking and will have to make a determination as to whether part-time, seasonal, or temporary employees will be covered I'm always interested in feedback. So if you have thoughts on that, you can share it in the chat or share it with me separately. But I believe we'll probably be including the part-time and seasonal employees, and I'm not so sure about temporary. So we're going to see what the board wants to choose about that. So the law requires that the board set up an automatic payroll deduction Roth IRA that is going to automatically enroll employees with 5% of their compensation automatically deducted into the program through a payroll deduction option, through a payroll deduction. The employees will also be subject to an automatic increase of 1% annually up to an initial cap of 8%. So those are the default provisions. That's where employees will be defaulted into at 5% of their income and 1% auto escalation. Employees have the opportunity to opt out of any of these default positions. They can opt out of the 5%. They can make it 4%. They can make it 6%. They can make it 0%. They can choose to opt out entirely. So they can opt out of that default. They can also opt out of the automatic escalation. They can choose to not have any escalation. They can choose to escalate by 2%. So they can make those changes. But if the employee does nothing, which is often the case, they will be automatically enrolled at 5% with the 1% annual automatic escalation. This is one of the key reasons we wanted to do this presentation right now, this next bullet point. The statute as enacted has a mandatory deadline saying that employers must start enrolling by April 1, 2023 if they have 25 or more employees. We will not have a program ready for employers to enroll in on April 1, 2023. As I mentioned, working with the states, a bit of a process. We have to go through our due diligence in getting a program started, and then there's startup time. So it will not be ready at that date. There is legislation that will be considered this session that will extend that date. The legislation is currently at the revisor's office being drafted. It is sponsored by Senator Vitelli, who was the original sponsor of this legislation. And it will extend some of the deadlines in the initial legislation. Our goal, hopefully, will be to not extend it very, very far. And where the original legislation provided for waves of employers to enroll, first those with 25 plus, then those with 15 plus, then those with 5 plus, those will just likely be compressed. So we will hopefully get to the threshold of 5 employees or all employees by that April 2024 date. Our goal is to be there at the same time, just compressing the waves a little bit. That's what the legislation will do, and we'll see if that passes. So you never know in the legislative process, but I think it has a pretty good chance. And certainly the deadline will be extended because we understand employers cannot be held to a deadline that they can't meet because we haven't offered the program required to meet that. Next slide.
So just to echo that, you heard it here first, that the initial deadline will be delayed, but it sounds like the sort of final deadline, which was the kind of the phase down to 5 or more employees, which is April of 2024, is tentatively still in place. So this is still going to happen in the next year or so. And certainly as anybody who's, involved with retirement plans and payroll can understand that, don't wait till the last minute to start to implement some of these things, whatever way you decide to go. So again, just want to make sure people realize that while maybe that initial deadline is being delayed, doesn't hurt to start a little early.
So this is true. Of course, you won't be able to start early on our program until we let you know it's available. And to that end, the other thing that the legislation is going to include is a pilot program. So if you want to be one of those businesses that gets in early and works with us, we would love to have volunteers to be in the pilot program. We're going to be looking for businesses across the state and across industries, different sizes, different geographies, different industries. So you can contact me if that is of interest to you. That won't be happening for a while either, but we're going to start gathering names as soon as we can. A little bit more about the program as it is in the legislation and as I know is likely to happen. Covered employees that opt out may be re-enrolled again, and that will probably be at regular intervals. And that's how most states do it. They have a regular interval where the employee is identified as having opted out and is given that chance to enroll and opt out again if that's what they choose. I want to very much emphasize this next bullet. And I will say Nate wrote most of these slides, but I would probably have done this even stronger. Employers are not required, nor are they permitted to contribute. The employer here is really kind of a flow-through machine. They are not going to be determined. They are not running an employer-sponsored plan. They are really running payroll deduction. That is all they are doing. They are not allowed to contribute. They should not be providing really any information to their employees, except the information that the program provides to give to them. So that you're not providing as an employer advice or other aspects of running the program. You're doing a payroll deduction. And toward that end, for employers, it should be really straightforward. In other states, it takes about 10 to 12 minutes to register your employee. So it really should be a functional administrative thing for employers to do. One that they have to do because there will be penalties if you do not comply. Those penalties currently start at $10 per employee, and they do increase. And of course, the penalty timeline will also get pushed out just a little bit by this legislation, just so everything is essentially on the same timeline, but pushed back a few months or about a year. And the last slide, just for those who are curious, the legislation does apply to cannabis-related businesses. The program, as you might have noticed on the slide that Nate showed earlier about where programs are already operating in this country, Oregon and Colorado, both states with large cannabis industries, both have real operating programs at this time. I understand from my colleagues in Colorado that one difference for cannabis-related businesses is that they have to provide an NAICS code. And in Colorado, they can actually do that for them because that is publicly available on sites. Maine has a fair amount of information publicly available about cannabis-related businesses. We may be able to get that as an entity, but if we can't, that might just be one data element that cannabis-related businesses have to enter that other businesses don't, but that's pretty small. So other than that, cannabis-related businesses are covered businesses just like every other business in the state of Maine.
And there was a question, but this next slide, we're going to address it. So
Okay.
we'll roll right into it. And the question was, for what it's worth, was whether there'll be a specifically designated record keeper, which is the first bullet on this slide.
So there will be a program administrator. And again, the slide is drafted as what do we not know? We still do not know who the program administrator will be. But the board has determined that their first priority is to establish a partnership with an existing state program. The board has made that decision because Maine is a small state and will have a relatively small number of accounts compared to a state like California. And all of the accounts nationwide are small dollar accounts. So any efficiencies that we can put into the program, we're looking to do. And partnering with another state will allow us to gain some efficiencies in running the program. So because the state's looking at a partner, because we're looking to develop a partner, we know that the program administrator at this time is very likely to be one of two program administrator providers around the country who are Ascensus and Vestwell. Some of you may be familiar with those names. They are in the financial services industry. Vestwell is currently a program administrator for Maine's 529 plan. So that's basically what Ascensus and Vestwell do. They both have a strong space and a strong presence in the space of state-provided financial programs. They run 529 programs, college savings programs. They run ABLE programs. So they have a lot of experience in this space. And because those are the only two providers currently, it is very likely that that is who Maine will be working with for this program. They work with other service providers, and because we will be partnering with one of those states' programs, we'll end up using the other service providers that they use for record keeping and everything else. And those are typical commercial custodians in the business. And will the participants have access to fiduciary advice? So that question, they will not have access to fiduciary advice from the program. So they will have access to information and be advised to get fiduciary advice should they want it. Investment options, again, will be determined to some extent by our partner program. But of course, that's one of the board's obligations as fiduciaries to the program, is to make sure that those investment options make sense for Maine. So the board will be looking at the investment options offered by the other programs as part of its determination of which program to partner with. Investment options in this space are very, very similar. They are generally a default investment option first into a fund, basically a money market fund, where it's a capital preservation fund. And that's basically where funds are put, particularly for the first 30 days, where people find that employees did not take the opportunity to opt out before the program started taking money out of the automatic deduction. And that happened. And now they looked at their pay stub and they said, gee, I want less out, or I want to opt out. So that does happen in the first 30 days. So that will be a capital preservation account. And then in some states, I will say the capital preservation account can be 30 days or 90 days. In one state, they actually have $1,000 hold. They wait till there's $1,000 in there, and then they move to a retirement track type portfolio. So that it's an age-based portfolio where the option is, the default option is going to be based on at retirement of approximately 65, you'll be put into a portfolio option that is meant for a target date portfolio fund, essentially. So that will be the default option for most people. Again, employees can opt out of those default options. They can choose to participate in any of the other options, and they can make that change pretty much at any time. It might be limited to once a month, but they will have regular opportunity to choose where they want to invest. But they will be defaulted into capital preservation and then target date fund. All of the programs that exist allow for both traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. Again, the default option is the Roth IRA. The employee needs to take an action to participate in a traditional IRA, but that is available if the employee chooses to take that action. And who will record keep the income limits applicable to IRAs? And that is going to be on the employee. They're going to need to know if they're above those income limits to participate in an IRA.
Awesome. I want to stop there for just a split second and see if there are any questions specific to the program itself. I saw that there's one regarding the taxes that I think we'll be able to answer when we go through the alternative plan options and we do sort of a side-by-side comparison. As you're maybe submitting some questions, I just want to sort of hand it off. So Chris Cluff, as Tommy had mentioned at the beginning, president of PaperTrails, which is a great local payroll provider out of the Kennebunk area. The reason, I think it's really important that we have a payroll provider on this presentation is because while a lot of the responsibilities for implementing this program will just be, remitting payroll, I think for small businesses, that's still, maybe a high bar of responsibility. And so a lot of the onus of this, I think, will end up being taken on by some of these local payroll providers, PaperTrails being one in particular, that's going to help these smaller businesses be able to implement and track some of these things on behalf of their employees. And I know Chris takes a very hands-on approach with his clients, and so very excited that he's able to sort of cover how he's going to be working to implement this for businesses and what some things that employers should be aware of as they look to implement this program. So I didn't see any questions yet. So I guess, Chris, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. So obviously, if you're going to choose to go into the state's new retirement plan, we got to get ready for it. Remember, you can still, put into place a 401k or a simple IRA or something like that in order to not have to deal with this. But if you do want to go into this program, like Nate said, plan, get ready. It's coming down the road quicker than you think. So evaluate your options and get ready for that. Like Nate said, we are really hands-on with our clients, and we know that we're going to be getting in, down and dirty into this program, helping our clients get implemented into the new Maine Saves program. We know through Beth, thanks, we have this great connection, kind of how this is going to work now when this does roll out. And this is very similar to what other states do. Soon, once the state is ready, they choose their retirement provider. Businesses are going to get notification to register with the state for this program. Similar to how you register for unemployment or other state programs, you go in, get your business registered. Once you have gotten yourself registered, it's really simple. If you offer an existing qualified retirement plan, you mark yourself as exempt. There's still some determination as to whether or not you're going to have to provide proof of that and so forth. But if you mark yourself exempt, you do not have to enroll anybody in this plan. You just move about your day, continue to administer your existing retirement plan. If you are not offering an existing retirement plan, you can enroll in the program. And that will involve getting your employees set up in the system, uploading a census, choosing deductions for those employees. The employees themselves will also enroll or get auto-enrolled. And once everything is done, then you want to go into payroll, whether you're doing it in-house or with a provider, and get all that information set up for deduction processing. One of the big things that we're going to talk about, Nate, why don't you flip to the next slide real quick? The big thing is payroll integration, right? So we know that the plan providers that the state is working with today have integrations with payroll providers today, and we're very much looking forward to that on our program as well. The big thing with that is that's going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to make my life a lot easier, and it's going to in turn make your lives a lot easier. We want to be able to have a 360 integration. So if an employee goes in and enrolls on their portal with the state, with Vestwell or a census, whoever it ends up being, they say, hey, I want to go to 3%. I don't want to do that 5%. That's automatically going to flow into payroll so that those deductions are updated. You don't have to manage that information. If we don't have that payroll integration, or if you're doing in-house or something like that, you're going to have to manually manage that. So it's really important to plan how you're going to manage this, pretty quickly. Likewise, when the payroll is processed and the deductions happen, now we need to send that information off to Vestwell or Census and get those contributions funded. And again, that integration, once payroll is processed, we're going to be able to send off contribution amounts automatically to the provider, and those funds will be deducted from the company's bank accounts in order to fund the retirement plan. So when we talk about that integration, that's key. If you don't have that integration, this is going to be a much more manual process. You're going to have to send a report off to a census or log into their or Vestwell, whoever it ends up being, and go ahead and manually make those contributions, whether you're writing a check or whether you're logging into their website to process contributions manually. It's just going to be a lot more burdensome on you as an employer. So really trying to find a way to integrate is going to be key. So whether that's through a payroll processor or through your own system, exports and imports, things like that, make your life easier. That's the big key. We talked a little bit about that auto enrollment, right? So again, you are going to be responsible for managing that. So it's really important to either get the employees to take control of that. We all know what it's like managing employees. It's like herding cats some days. So it is unfortunately another administrative burden on you, but it's definitely something that you can try to work towards to make it more automated again through those auto enrollments and things like that. We know that there are contribution limits. 2023, the contribution limit for a Roth IRA is $6,500. We also know that there are income limits. And Beth just told us that the income limit is kind of incumbent upon the employee to track. I would tend to think the folks that are in that bracket would know that they're not eligible for a Roth IRA. It's 100 and what is it this year, Nate? 147,000 ish.
Close enough.
Do I have it on my little cheat card? I don't. I'm going to put that on the cheat card for next year. So basically, the income limit for a Roth IRA is 140 something thousand dollars, I think, this year. And so if you make over that, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. So that's going to be incumbent upon the employee to really track that. We also know, like we just said, that there are contribution limits annually, $6,500 this year, and that will adjust potentially every year depending on the IRS limit. So you, as the employer, will need to be tracking that. The contribution limits annually. And again, having a good payroll system process in place is going to be important. Just like any function of bookkeeping and your accounting program, you're going to want to make sure you're doing an annual review, making sure you've made all the contributions that are required of you, right? Make sure there's not money sitting on your books that needs to be sent to the state program. There are ERISA rules about, transmitting money within a timely manner. You don't want to fall into those issues. So really important, make sure you're doing an annual review. Unlike a 401k, there's not going to be an annual audit or testing or reporting requirements on this. But it's, again, important to make sure the biggest thing is that you are transmitting the funds in a timely manner, because that is your fiduciary responsibility as the employer. So go next there, Nate.
Awesome. And Chris, you had mentioned that if you sponsor a retirement plan, you are exempt from this legislation. Can you maybe give an example of some?
Yeah, absolutely. So here are the most common ones that small businesses use. Simple IRA and a 401k are traditionally the most common retirement sponsored plans. There's also options. You could do a SEP IRA, you could do a 403b, and any one of the defined benefit plans, which are much less common. Let's go to the next slide, because we're going to actually kind of do a comparison here. So we have a side-by-side comparison of what these plans look like. So if you want to implement one of these plans, you absolutely can. On the first column, we have what the Maine Retirement Savings Program is going to look like. It is a Roth IRA. It's really easy to set up. Anybody can go into it. We know that there are annual contribution limits on this, $6,500 with an extra $1,000 catch-up. We also know that there are income limits, so keep an eye on that. The nice thing about this is you, as the employer, do not have to match anything. So from a cost perspective, the financial cost is pretty low, right? There isn't a cost to this. Nothing for the employer. I think that was one of the questions. There's no fees or costs associated with implementing the state's plan. You are literally just the pass-through entity, as Beth mentioned. So
although after Chris is done, I'll talk a little bit more about the fees. So
there we go. Well, see, drum roll, please. That's exciting.
Well, there are no fees to the employer, but there are fees to the employee. So I want to just make sure that that's clear.
Sure, with any
like any plan, yeah,
like any investment vehicle, and any of these plans would have employee fees as well. I was just looking at my 401k statement for last quarter over the weekend, and gosh, they took a bunch of money from me, for all that administrative stuff. So the more common retirement plan for smaller businesses is a simple IRA. And the reason for that is one, it's limited to employers with 100 employees or less, because it is a simple plan. That's why it's called simple. The administrative burden is pretty low. With that, there are lower limits to contribute. So $15,500 this year. There's an additional amount if you're over 50, a nice catch-up amount. The employer can match, or they should match, up to 3% of the employee's compensation. And when we talk about these matches, we try to explain this to our clients every day. It's a 3% match of their wages, right? So that's a little confusing when we talk about matches. And I'm happy to, it's not necessarily 3 for 3, that's what everyone kind of thinks. It's really a 3% contribution. It's 100% match of their contribution up to 3% of their wages, if that makes sense, right? So you could also choose a 2% non-elective contribution, which would basically say whether or not the employee contributes anything, you as an employer are going to put 2% in. I will tell you, with my client base, I have nobody that does that. Everyone just does the match, because if you have someone that doesn't contribute anything, you still have to put that 2% in. So it's much more common to do that match. There are eligibility requirements to go into a simple IRA. It's a $5,000 compensation amount within the prior 2 years, and they have to be expected to make $5,000 or more in the coming year. So that's kind of the eligibility, the only eligibility that happens. There are no loans. We are going to get a Roth option coming up as part of Secure 2.0. Nate's going to talk about that a little bit. There is very limited employer oversight. There's no annual review. There's no audits. So that's really nice from an administrative perspective. A lot of smaller businesses choose a simple IRA because pretty much they set it and forget it. There's not a lot that goes into it. So the big dog in the game is, of course, the 401k, the 403b. These are highly customizable plans. You can choose many levers and switches to pull to make this plan the best for your business. You can set, different eligibility rules. You can set the rules pretty much any way you want within reason to benefit you and your employees. So, but with that, there is an administrative burden. Typically, it requires a high level of involvement from an investment advisor. You have to employ a third-party administrator. You really have a lot of reporting, testing, tracking that goes into this. But the reward for that is you have higher contribution limits. This coming year, 2023, we're at $22,500. Or if you're over 50, you can contribute to $30,000. So much higher limits, which could pay off for you. Contributions are discretionary. So there are many different, again, levers and switches to do this. You could do a match. You can do a non-elective contribution. You can do profit sharing. You can do all sorts of different ways that the employer can contribute to this. And again, that comes down to your plan design. And that's why it's such a high administrative burden, because really you can customize this any which way you want. So generally speaking, from a 401k, you can set these eligibility rules, timelines, things like that. But you must pretty much offer it to everybody that's at least 21 years old and has worked 1,000 hours in the last year. That's kind of the minimum threshold. Now you can, certainly change that. I think our 401k, for example, you have a 30-day wait. And it has to be 18. Everybody's a little bit different in how you plan that. So, you can design that eligibility much more specific to your business. If you're a seasonal business, for example, we have a lot of clients in where we are that are seasonal. So they want that threshold to be higher so that they're not contributing as much to their employees. So it's a matter of customizing that eligibility to meet your business. For a 403b, if you're using that option, basically all employees are immediately eligible. That is one function of that program. There are a lot more, options. You can do loans off a 401k. You can do a Roth contribution. You can create a vesting schedule. So if someone leaves, you may potentially be able to get your employer contribution back. There is a lot of testing that goes into this. There's a lot of fiduciary liability that goes into this. So, it's really important that you have a good team in place, that, your third-party administrator, your 316, kind of advisor and all that kind of stuff, that's really kind of coming through and helping you manage this plan, because especially when you get to higher amounts in your plan and more employees in your plan, there's auditing and further testing that goes along. So it's definitely some work to manage a 401k, but the benefits potentially could pay off for you. Again, we talked about that plan design. And then the nice thing we're going to talk about, I think Nate's going to talk about in just a minute, is the tax credits that are available for implementing a retirement plan. So some really good options from an easiest probably solution for you is this kind of state program. The next easiest is that simple IRA, and the more complicated but customizable option is that 401k, 403b. So Nate, do you have anything to add on these plans?
No, that was fantastic. We're hiring for financial advisors if you ever want to change professions. That was awesome.
That's what I got you for.
No, that was a great rundown of sort of the pros and cons of each. And again, goes back to that original point that the Maine Retirement Savings Program, again, isn't designed to replace, it's designed to complement. It's just another option for employers to help their employees start to think about and save for retirement. And there's going to be benefits and cons to each one of these different paths. To one of the questions they asked and Chris's answer, that Maine Retirement Savings Program is going to be very inexpensive for employers relative to sponsoring their own plan. That being said, employees will be a little bit more limited in how much they can save relative to an employer-sponsored plan. So there's always trade-offs. And again, that's where, it's helpful to work with either an advisor or somebody to kind of help you understand what might make the most sense for you. And for, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I would just add real quick that, even with any of these plans, it's going to be really important to have, a good administrative partner in your payroll HR kind of folks. setting these plans up for eligibility, tracking that eligibility if you are having an employer-sponsored plan is really important, and making sure that you're enrolling your employees when they should be enrolled, right? So having that ability to track those kind of things is really important as well. And also making sure the employer contributions are being tracked and calculated correctly. So.
Perfect. And that sort of brings us to kind of the last section here, which is, why sponsor a retirement plan? And
Can I just get to that fee question quick?
Of course.
Just to because it looked like the question was really about fees associated with the plan, on just generally speaking. And so, like every plan, there will be fees for the investments. They're very, very, very low, generally speaking, as the question suggests. They're target date funds. They're going to be mutual funds. So the underlying fund fees are quite low. Then there's going to be an administration fee for a census or Vestwell or whoever is managing the program, because that's how they're going to make their money. They're not charging any ongoing fee except through program administration fees in the other states. And of course, the Maine program needs to become self-sustaining. So we as a program will also be charging a fee to be determined. And most states are charging a hybrid fee of an account fee and some underlying asset-based fee, both relatively low. So just to be clear about what the fees are.
And Nate, real quick, I know I was stumped on my income limit. $153,000 this year is the income limit on a Roth IRA. So if you have an employee that earns over $153,000, they are not able to participate in the state's Roth IRA program. So
awesome. So last section here, why sponsor a retirement plan? You heard Chris mention, 401k plans can be a little bit more administratively burdensome. They may be more expensive. Maybe you have this, fiduciary liability. So why even bother, right? It sounds like all a big headache because, there's really no comparison for the sake of recruiting and retention. And this is, one of the main reasons why employers sponsor a plan is to make sure that their employees are able to save enough in order to sort of replace their income in retirement. And Chris had sort of talked about what those contribution limits are between an IRA and a 401k, and the difference between the contribution limits is quite significant. And then the second, big reason is obviously to use it as a recruiting and retention benefit. And I think one of the things that's really important to note with the Maine Retirement Savings Program is now almost every employer is going to be able to say that they offer some sort of retirement benefit, which is the goal of the law, right? Is to make sure that employees are saving for retirement. But that means the goalposts are continuing to be pushed back in terms of what defines and makes a competitive retirement benefits package. So when you look at a couple of these stats, you'll see that the vast majority of people nowadays make their employment decisions based on those benefits, and specifically on the retirement benefits that an employer offers. Over 1 out of 2 employees join their company largely because it offered a plan. Almost 3/4, or actually more than 3/4 of employees consider a retirement plan as a must-have employee benefit. So again, a lot of great reasons, especially in today's tight labor market, why you might want to consider sponsoring a plan if you haven't up until now. And then the other big thing, and this I think gets back to one of the questions, which is the tax benefits. So you kind of have this interesting situation going on right now where you have Maine really trying to encourage either small businesses starting a plan or enrolling their employees into the new Maine Retirement Savings Program. But at the same time, you also have federal legislation that's helping to subsidize a lot of the costs associated with starting an employer-sponsored plan. So Secure Act 2.0, it was passed the last week of December of last year as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, called it, the Omnibus Spending Bill there, increased the tax credits, the federal tax credits that are available for small businesses that start a qualifying retirement plan. So the credit has increased from up to 50% of your eligible costs associated with the program up to 100% of your retirement plan related costs. But it's limited to $250 per non-highly compensated employee that's eligible for the program, and no more than $5,000 a year. But that's a tax credit that's available each of the first 3 tax years for that plan. Additionally, if you add automatic enrollment, you'll get another $500 a year tax credit for each of the first 3 years. So again, while there might be some additional costs for sponsoring your own plan, some of that can be offset through these new federal tax credits. In addition, there's also a brand new tax credit that's available for new plans that also offer an employer contribution, whether a match or a non-elective. So for the first 2 years, you'll receive 100% or a dollar for dollar tax credit up to $1,000 per employee for that contribution. In addition, it's phased out over the next 3 or 4 years, but you still have that up to $1,000 per employee. So what we find is that for a lot of small businesses, almost all of their startup plan costs and any employer contribution they offer can be offset through these federal tax credits. So there are a lot of tax benefits for starting your own plan, on top of the fact that obviously employee contributions, if made pre-tax, are tax deductible, and employer contributions are also tax deductible as well. We often sometimes get some pushback from plan sponsors when we talk about automatic enrollment, automatic escalation. I don't know if it's fair to characterize us as a libertarian state, but I think some business owners are concerned about being too paternalistic. And so when you hear about this Maine Retirement Savings Program and this idea of having to automatically enroll your employees, and afraid they're going to kind of show up with pitchforks, which I can promise you is not going to happen. For better or for worse, automatic enrollment is coming to a plan near you. So Secure Act 2.0 actually mandated that for all new retirement plans started after the bill was passed or became law, they'll have to add automatic enrollment by 1/1/2025 and automatic escalation. Any plan that had started prior to Secure Act 2.0 passing, so basically prior to December 29th of last year, will be grandfathered. But for any plan started in the next couple of years, and then also for any plan started after 2025, you will have to have automatic features in your plan. So you can't avoid it by sponsoring your own plan, unfortunately. And again, the reason why you're seeing more and more of these auto features is because it works. That inertia and default bias is so powerful that if we can make the default saving for retirement and then have people have to opt out of that, we're going to find that, significantly more Mainers are going to end up saving for retirement than would have otherwise. Also, to help to offset some of that administrative burden for starting your own plan, you're also seeing a huge uptake or increase in the multiple employer plan space. So the Secure Act 1.0 back in 2019 made it a lot easier for employers to band together to start basically a combined 401k plan to help to sort of allocate some of that cost across or spread that cost across multiple employers and gives you a little bit more economies of scale. Secure Act 2.0 allows 403Bs to join MEPs as well. 403B really being the nonprofit equivalent of a 401k plan. So again, those are a couple of really big trends that we see coming in the next few years is more and more auto features and also more and more multiple employer plans for those smaller businesses that want to start a plan that maybe just can't afford to or want to offload a lot of that administrative. And then finally, I'd mentioned at the very beginning, the fact of the matter is $6,500 is what that contribution limit is for an IRA. Probably not going to be enough to retire on by itself. So again, maybe a reason, down the road, to the extent that as an employer you can afford to do so, might want to give consideration starting your own plan just because those contribution limits are so much higher and the amount you can save for retirement is so much more. So I saved a couple questions here for the end, and please, by all means, fire away. One of the questions I'll pose to Beth, although I think I know the answer, is if an employee already has their own IRA, does the employer still have to auto-enroll them into the program? So if an employee has an IRA, does the employer still have to put them into this program?
They do. And the employer is unlikely to know that their employee has an IRA. There's no reason that they would know that, generally speaking, but they do have to auto-enroll them. And it's up to the employee to choose to opt out of this program and stick with the IRA that they originally set up, or they might say, I'm going to go with this one. And these are all portable. So if the employee chooses, they can roll it over into their other IRA at any time.
Perfect. There was a question from Ben, tax-wise, would it be better for an employer to offer a retirement plan outside the Maine Retirement Savings Program? I'm not an accountant. I'm not a licensed tax professional. My compliance team would be very happy to hear me say that. So I'm not going to provide tax advice to that question. I think we sort of highlighted some of the tax benefits for sponsoring your old plan relative to the Maine Retirement Savings Program, but for what makes the most sense for your employer from a tax perspective, I would certainly encourage you to reach out to your CPA or whatever licensed tax professional you work with. Any other questions on the program, on anything else we covered? And again, here's our contact information. If you have questions that you want to reach out to any of us directly, by all means, please feel free to do so.
Right. And in my case, if you have any comments, this is a program that's being created. So if you've got thoughts about what would make it better or what you don't want to see in it, definitely reach out to me because I want to hear it. It's much easier to work these things in as we're getting started than to try to clean up later.
Awesome. Well, not seeing any other questions, I think we can hand it back over to Tommy.
Well, great presentation, guys. Thank you again. Lots of great information in there and very timely as well. I want to thank Nate, Beth, and Chris for this great presentation. And again, thanks to the Chamber staff for helping produce another successful event. Thanks again to each of you for attending today and throughout this year. If you're interested in learning more about Maine's new retirement plan mandate, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. Another shout out to our sponsors, Eaton Peabody, for their support to the Growth Basics for Business series throughout the entire year. We look forward to seeing you again on February 21st for a topic that is still yet to be determined. The Eaton Peabody Growth Basics for Business series is typically held on the second or third Tuesday of each month. With that being said, have a wonderful rest of your day and stay safe and warm. Have a great week.